My initial curiosity about the deep web came from listening to various YouTube narrators who tell stories of all the horrible things that happen to people whenever they decide to surf it. I suppose a lot of people take these stories as some sort of warning to keep as far away as possible. But there are probably some people out there who want to go on the deep web because they're looking for danger. And then there's people like me, people who realize that deep web stories most often happen to be a bunch of bullshit. Now, I know there's a difference between the deep web and the dark web. Obviously, when most of us are talking about the deep web, what they really mean are those shady corners where all the bad stuff happens, the dark web. I went in and did some research on the actual deep web and found something I believe to be more true. Rather than a haven for all sorts of criminal activity, it's mostly just a big catalog of scanned documents people don't care about and random websites. Something like business documents that have no purpose appearing on Google search anyway. I've expressed my disbelief in this sort of thing to various people who post deep web stories. Generally, they tell me I'm a stupid idiot and the deep web is the most dangerous place of all. I simply laugh at them. After I posted a negative comment about the deep web believers on one of these videos, I got some private messages daring me to go on to the deep web, if I was brave enough, of course. I answered and explained it had nothing to do with bravery or lack thereof. I simply didn't know how to access it myself and didn't really feel like researching it and being bored off my ass. One of the people challenging me told me he would explain to me step by step how to do so. He also said he knew of a particular website I could go to that would be anything but boring. It was a game of sorts. He told me that if I'd ever played Clue before, it was a lot like that, so I would be going on to the deep web per his instructions, and I would have an activity to do. If I was as brave as I thought I was, then I would do it. The criteria I had laid out for not wanting to go there had been taken care of, so basically it was now put up or shut up for me. I decided to go ahead and do it. I figured, what do I got to lose? It would be funny to go ahead and see what all this fuss was about anyway, or wasn't about if nothing was actually there. The guy explained to me what to do. I got the Tor browser and he gave me directions on how to get to this game of his. I was in the mood to be scared, and although I didn't really believe it would happen, I decided to go ahead and make the atmosphere in my house as creepy as possible. I went into the kitchen because we have a bunch of glass doors there. At night, the room can have a very creepy ambiance. I set my laptop on the desk and followed the man's instructions. I was a bit disappointed when I got to the website, I must say. It was less like a modern-day computer game and more like one of those text-based games from the earlier computer days. You know what I mean, like the Zork games. First, it asked me to input my name. My name is Alex, but I wasn't going to use that since it's my real name. I typed in Josh instead. I may not believe in the insidious nature of the deep web, but that didn't mean that I didn't want to be cautious with my information while I was there. The rest of the game played out in a very strange way. It gave me a list of names, much like the ones you would get from a Clue game, but much more comical. More along the lines of Colonel Mustard and Sergeant Ketchup. And no, I'm not kidding at all. The game itself was like 20 questions almost. I would have to ask questions in order to find who the victim was, what room they were, what weapon they were killed with. In order to come to any conclusions, I had to eliminate rooms, weapons, and people by asking these questions. Actually, it was quite a lot of fun. I found myself getting really into it. I must have been playing about an hour and a half when I had finally asked the maximum number of questions allowed. Then, up on the screen popped the instructions, guess the victim. Honestly, I have no memory of what I typed in. I typed in a name, a weapon, a room. It took me a moment, but the game then told me my answer was incorrect. The next line sent a chill down my spine, a part of the game I will never forget. The victim is Alexander, in the kitchen, with a butcher knife. I stopped and several things rushed through my mind. How did they know my name? I mean, that was scary enough, but how did they know I was in the kitchen? Was someone watching me? I jumped up and ran over and turned on the outside lights. I was scared someone might be seen outside the glass doors watching me, but of course no one was there. I made sure the doors were locked before going back to my computer. I left the website and closed my laptop shaking. Eventually, I asked a more savvy friend about it. He was really good with computers. He told me it was just some website set up by a hacker or something, which turned my laptop into a webcam through the internet. He said they'd hacked into it and got my name. I really had no idea people could even do that. I don't really want to have any idea. I don't know if it was just a trick or what. Maybe even the guy who challenged me had set it up himself to scare me. But nothing actually happened to me, so that's good at least. I'm a big professional wrestling fan. Please don't give me crap about it being lowbrow entertainment and fake and blah blah blah. I know it's lowbrow and fake. That's exactly what I love about it. I'm also a fan of horror. I mean, I guess I'd have to be if I'm submitting horror stories to a YouTube channel. I also heard that many people are skeptical about what happens on the deep web, so I want to share an experience that I personally had. Now, I'm not one of those people who downloaded Tor and went to a horrible website, then got scared by scary pictures and deleted it, never to return again. I've had Tor on my computer for quite a long time now, actually, and I still have it on me now. I figure, I'm not really doing anything illegal myself, so might as well see what I can find on there. Hell, I'm even a member of several forums on there. I'll be honest though, the majority of what I've seen on the deep web pales in comparison to the stories I've heard. One thing that sticks out with me more than anything else though, is the video of a wrestling match I saw on the deep web. I found out about this match because another guy on one of the forums I post on saw I had quoted Ric Flair as my signature. He asked me if I liked pro wrestling. I let him know that I really enjoyed it. He asked me if I wanted to watch something real sick then, and he would direct me to it. I'm not sure at first if I wanted to. Wrestling is something I enjoy, but it's not really something I want to mix with horror. Kind of a weird mixture, I mean, I still haven't even seen the movie Pro Wrestlers vs. Zombies, and that already looks really bad. Maybe it might be enjoyable though. The guy insisted the video on the deep web was really cool and disturbing, and promised me I would not regret it. Alright, before I go any further, I have to tell you it's probably not what you're thinking. What I saw was not someone getting brutally and savagely killed or beaten half to death in the rain or something. I'm sure that's where your mind must have been going. Wrestling match on the deep web ends up being a snuff film match, but that's not it. I went to the website with the video on it and let it start to load. It took nearly 5 minutes to even begin playing. It was like one of those low-quality porn sites with a ton of ads and videos that never play when you go in. You know the ones I mean. Don't lie, you've been there and we all know it. Anyway, when the video started playing, it was pretty weird. It was taking place in an actual wrestling ring, but it looked like it was set up in someone's basement. There was barely enough room for anything other than the ring itself. The ceiling was so low that no one could get on top of the ropes if they were in the mood to. I kept on wondering what could possibly make this match so special. I found out pretty quickly though. A man dressed in black spandex, sort of like a Venom costume if you're familiar from Spider-Man, was standing in the corner of the ring. The camera then showed me his opponent, a man lying in the center. He had one of those wrestling masks on, but there was no doubt by the look in the man's eyes that this person was already dead. The bell rang, and I witnessed the worst thing I ever saw in my life. The alive wrestler ran over and dropped an elbow onto the dead one with a sickening thud. The dead body randomly wriggled around. The alive wrestler used holds and moves on this corpse. I won't explain the whole match to you, but I'll explain why it was so disturbing. The dead man's eyes were always facing the camera. You could see they were empty. And his body was so stiff the alive wrestler could barely even move his limbs. Whenever he tried to pick up the corpse's arms or legs, the body would just flop about randomly on the mat. Another disturbing fact, the dead body did not have much flexibility, so as you can imagine, the moves were very awkward. The absolute worst moment came though, when the live man grabbed the dead one's legs. They flipped the corpse over onto its stomach and put it into a Boston crab, which is where the wrestler bends the prone wrestler's legs backwards over his back and sits down, basically bending the person's spine in the wrong direction. Well, normally that's just a wrestling move, but instantly I heard a sickening crack, and I saw the dead body's eyes staring at me as his body folded in half. That was more than I could take. I clicked out of the video. I tried to find a happier website on the shallow web to get the look of those dead eyes out of my mind and to forget that sickening cracking noise. I don't know if it's illegal to wrestle with corpses, and I couldn't really care less, honestly. Although I still do surf on the deep web, I've never been curious enough to go back to that site and finish watching that disgusting video. Yeah, I know you're probably skeptical about the deep web too. My thoughts on it are this. You might not see someone getting killed or whatever. Someone might not find out where you live and stalk you, but that doesn't mean there aren't some freaky-ass things on there. I, 40 and female, went to the university at Buffalo fresh out of high school in the early 2000s or so. At that time, the online world was a bit like the Wild West. It included having to do quite a bit more digging to find out specific information, rather than today's split-second Google search. As such, it was a much easier time for colleagues in universities to hide or spin campus crime statistics to make themselves look better for prospective students. Case in point, I was at an orientation a month or two before my freshman year. One of the mass presentations I had to attend was about campus safety. Bright-faced upperclassmen orientation aides enthusiastically verbally fellated the school, boasting about how North Campus was at the time, the safest town in the country. The only murder in recent history had occurred 9 years ago, to an unfortunate student named Linda Yalem, who was murdered on the campus's bike path during a lone early morning run. It was a fate that we were assured could be avoided simply by not hitting the bike path alone. What they conveniently neglected to reveal during this presentation was that A, the killer had never been caught, and that B, Yalem was not his only victim. He was a serial attacker, and eventually a serial killer, who had already been active in the area for at least 25 years in downtown Buffalo. On the secluded bike paths of the Buffalo suburbs, nowhere was safe. In retrospect, had this information been as readily accessible as it is now, it probably would have kept me from the most bone-chilling encounter in my life. Fast forward 3 years for now, though. I was a very depressed 20-year-old who was struggling with her sexual identity and her parents' reaction to it in a much less accepting time than now. I'd left school and, to avoid being home, shacked up with a woman who promised me the world, then rejected me in favor of her ex-girlfriend on the very night I moved in. So, clearly I was a very unhappy young adult, desperate for love and a sense of belonging, sometimes to my own detriment. Despite my roommate's many unkind and hurtful gestures, I stuck with it in the naive hope that she would eventually come around and fulfill her pie-in-the-sky promises to me. On a particular July night, that hope just fell flat altogether. I was at Roxy's Green Room, a now defunct lesbian bar and club that many wayward Buffalo lesbians, myself included, flocked to at night to feel a much-needed sense of community, and hopefully to land a special someone. Since the latter was just not happening for me, I was still stuck with my roommate. She liked to dangle emotional carrots overhead out of some sick joy she got from making me hurt but also hang on to hope. After a promise to hit Roxy's alone with me and talk about us finally, she showed up with her ex turned current and shut me out completely. I was upset enough to leave alone at around 1 a.m., well before the 4 a.m. last call. I was young and spry enough to walk without a ride home, which my usually wiser self would have secured before leaving. While my apartment was technically walking distance, it was a good half-hour walk or so. Being as emotionally charged as I was, I angrily hoofed it down the Main Street sidewalk, managing to follow the pedestrian rule of walking against traffic. Despite stupidly ignoring the rule I knew well from years of watching forensic shows, if you're a woman, never leave a bar at night alone, especially if you have to walk a long distance. I'd gotten exactly halfway there when a dark green sedan started driving toward me. I thought nothing of it until the car slowed down near me as I walked by. A lone middle-aged man was in the car, with a skin tone I originally associated with being Italian, but in retrospect could have easily been Puerto Rican or something. He had dark hair, and most importantly, his dark eyes seemed to hold no light of good intentions. I was used to guys being pigs. I'd been catcalled and endured all manner of wholly unwanted, graphic, and hand-fisted advances from dudes everywhere. Although I'd never take the stance that I was asking for it, I was young and thin, so I was dressed in a tight red crop top with flare-legged black spandex pants that night. I didn't pay much attention though. A guy old enough to be my dad looking at me like that, I was simply annoyed. My walk quickly resumed. I put the guy out of my mind and continued onward, but the peace, of course, would not last. About 2 or 3 minutes later, I see a familiar green car coming up behind me again. This time, the guy's window was down a bit, and he shouted, "Hey!" He beckoned to me in a way that made me wonder if he might have mistaken me for a lady of the night. That really incensed me. I flashed him a quick, annoyed look to inform him that despite my mildly revealing clothing, he was barking up the wrong tree for several reasons. I ignored him and started walking faster. He sped off again, only to turn around once more. At that point, it became clear this dude was casing me, like a cat burglar cases a house. It was before the time of Uber, or even widespread use of cell phones. No cabs were passing by either. Public transit existed, but it was both sparse and not running nearby this area. The stretches of main between intersections were long. Being 15 minutes away from either my home or going back, there was no way I could get anywhere near either place before the green car came up upon me again. I quickly thumbed through my mental list of true crime show-inspired safety tips that would have kept me out of this situation in the first place. Tip 1, get to an open business or something. Then the guy would either give up or get caught. I was coming upon a convenience store on the opposite side of the street where I'd bought cigarettes earlier. As I got a bit closer though, I could see it was unfortunately closed. I looked around for anything else. Another bar, a gas station. The street was flanked by shuttered brick buildings and a locked-up church. Then came the headlights and the car once again. Again, the guy slowed down as he approached me, but his demeanor had shifted quite massively. He put his palm out impatiently, as if he couldn't understand why I wasn't coming with him. "Come on!" the guy yelled through his now open window. I kept out of arm's reach on the sidewalk and once again ignored him. This time I was properly shaken though. He hit the gas and sped off on his familiar circuit back around to me. Now I knew I was in trouble. I was genuinely scared this guy's next move would be to simply grab me off the sidewalk and pull me into his car. I scrambled to figure out what to do. I remembered making myself impossible to ignore and obviously in distress could get me some help from an outside party. I ran right into the middle of Main Street and started frantically waving my hands and shouting at every car coming my way. The first car drove by, the second as well. The terror in me was palpable. I knew the stories of city dwellers like Kitty Genovese who were left to their horrible fates at the hands of monsters by jaded throngs of people who'd heard the attacks and their cries for help, but did nothing. Just as I was beginning to lose hope though, a van pulled over that had 4 black guys in it. In a game of numbers, this van of guys was much safer than that single stalker in the green car. I opted to take the gamble. I rushed over to them and told them about the man in the green car who was following me around the block over and over. I begged them for a ride home. The driver asked if I had any money in exchange for the favor. Unfortunately, I didn't. He then asked if I had any cigarettes at least. I may be one of the only people you'll ever meet who actually had their life saved by cigarettes. "Yes," I answered urgently. "I just bought a pack. You can have the whole damn thing if you get me home." Admittedly, I was a bit miffed that the driver wanted something from me in exchange for not letting me get abducted off the street. Still, I had the Marlboros, he had the vehicle, and the stars hopefully aligned. After a second or two of thought, the driver agreed. One of the 2 dudes in the back opened the side door for me and got out so I could slide into the seat behind the driver. as the door to my safe carriage full of impromptu nights shut and I got buckled in. I looked out the window just in time to see the green car creeping past the van, proving to my saviors that I was telling a very disturbing true story. Until my dying day, I'll never forget the look in that man's eyes as he was driving past. Feeling safe, surrounded in a closed van full of young, tough-looking rescuers, I looked that bastard dead in the eyes. He gave me the most hateful, evil look I'd ever seen. His eyes were black and thin, almost like a cat's eyes when its hunting instincts have been activated. He sped off into the night, and so did we, taking a less direct route to make sure we lost him. After a blessedly quick jaunt with frequent looks behind my shoulder, I was delivered home safely, one pack of cigarettes short, but alive and in one piece. The first thing I did when I got in the door was to check the locks on everything. After that, the adrenaline started to wear off, and the fear set in. I was terrified that the man in the sedan was searching the area where I got dropped off at. I grabbed the cordless phone and laid completely flat on the living room floor for hours to keep totally out of sight from any windows. As I laid there, I called the Buffalo police and relayed my terrifying tale in as much detail as I could give them. Fast forward another 4 years. I'd moved out to Chicago to live with my then girlfriend. For about half of my 4 years there, I was pretty homesick. I'd never lived anywhere except my home state of New York, and I went there knowing no one except my ex, who wasn't exactly an empathetic soul. I coped by keeping up on upstate New York news. On a chilly mid-January morning in 2007, I was at our computer looking up headlines from my home state, when one popped up that immediately snared my attention. Bike path killer arrested. By then, I knew the moniker well. The internet has since aged into a beautiful organized repository of knowledge, and despite the lack of transparency from my alma mater, I became familiar with the Buffalo area mystery man and his active status throughout my whole time in Buffalo. The man's name was Artemio Sanchez, a middle-aged native of Puerto Rico, who coached his son's sports teams and was affectionately referred to as Uncle Al in his neighborhood. As with many other killers, his disguises were his community involvement and being very ordinary. The man was estimated to have been responsible for 9 to 15 rapes around the area since 1975. He also confessed to 3 murders: the Yalem murder in 1991, a second one in 1992, and a third which only occurred 3.5 months prior to his capture. I don't know if you've ever felt your heart somehow get wedged into your voice box and get dropped into the depths of your stomach simultaneously, but believe me when I say it's possible, given the right catalyst. For me, that was the printed proof that the man who was active while I lived in Buffalo frequented the Roxy's area. Furthermore, I knew serial killers rarely take breaks as lengthy as the one between his 1992 and 2006 killings. He must have been attempting to sate his evil impulses on me that night. That realization gave me a very bad feeling that I'd crossed paths with someone more dangerous than I'd ever realized. Of course, as soon as I searched the man's name and found his picture, I was horrified, though not surprised, to see those same soulless predatory eyes I'd looked into on that summer night in Buffalo in 2003.